Imagine you're clinging to a vine on a cliff edge, and suddenly the grip just loosens. That visceral sense of losing your balance is exactly what happens when a partner suddenly pulls away. It hits you with a heavy, sinking feeling, and then the internal spiral begins. You don't just miss them. Your brain starts frantically searching for a reason. You replay every text, every smile, and every comment, looking for a red flag you allegedly stepped on. Is he angry? Did I do something wrong? These chaotic thoughts aren't just vanity. They are a biological survival instinct firing off alarms. Your brain craves the data and connection, so when the silence hits, your anxiety spikes. It feels like the world is screaming in your ear, leaving you exposed and stopped in your tracks. You need to detach from the panic before you crush yourself under the weight of regret, because that surge of adrenaline isn't love, it's fear. If you can understand that fear, you can finally understand why this distance might not be a goodbye. Have you ever felt that pit in your stomach when his texting slows down, making you believe he's strategically keeping you in suspense to test if you're a worthy prize? It paints men as cunning game players, finding pleasure in the chase. But here's the psychological truth. By the time a man feels secure enough to withdraw, he isn't trying to manipulate you, he's likely deactivating. It's a biological paradox, where high safety actually produces low motivation to procreate. He isn't moving away because he's losing interest. He's retreating because he feels safe enough to go dormant, needing to recharge his autonomy like a wild animal, finding a den. Treat this distance not as a trap to escape, but as a sign that his comfort with you has reached a level of intimacy that requires a pause. Think of a man disappearing back into his inner fort, not as an act of cruelty, but as a biological recalibration. He doesn't pull away to define boundaries star against star you. Rather, he retreats primarily to secure his own autonomy. Evolution wired men to hunt, mentally that is, by detaching and recharging in solitude. That primal drive makes him feel safest when he's marking his own mental territory. When he seems to shut down, he's pacing the perimeter of his self, squeezing out stress to regain control. This isn't a rejection of the relationship. It's a necessary reboot of his internal wiring. It's not him walking out the door, it's just him finding his footing. And usually, that's when his devotion comes back in full force. Imagine a rubber band stretching until it's dangerously close to snapping. One partner pulls back to shore, desperate for autonomy, while the other panics and chases, endlessly trying to secure a connection that feels emotionally unsafe. This is the anxious versus avoidant dance, and statistically, you are likely trapped in this toxic rhythm right now. Psychologically, intimacy triggers a biological alarm bell for the avoidant partner, making your affection feel like suffocation, ultimately causing them to instinctively flee to protect their emotional sandbox. Meanwhile, the anxious partner interprets that retreat as a direct rejection, squeezing tighter to fill the void. It creates a vicious, unsustainable cycle of chasing and fleeing, driven not by a lack of love, but by a deep-seated survival mechanism that keeps two people magnetically locked in painful conflict. And once you recognize this pattern, you finally have the power to break the cycle. Picture this. You meet a guy who turns out to be amazing, so you decide to double down on showing him how much he means to you by texting constantly, orchestrating every date, and validating him aggressively. You think you are nurturing a connection, but biologically, you might actually be putting him in a trap. To a man, that suffocating level of pursuit triggers the ancient freeze mechanism, where his brain interprets your intensity as a threat to his independence. He isn't pulling away because he doesn't care. He is mentally retreating to a command center to reset his safety system. You've flipped his interest switch to a panic switch by closing the distance. If you chase the distance, you only make the walls tighter, so the only way to snap him out of this retreat is to stop and let him breathe. Think of a woman's brain as a crowded room full of doors. When she feels overwhelming emotion, she instinctively walks through one to find relief and breath. A man's brain, however, is like a locked room filled with intricate blueprints. When that emotional pressure starts knocking, he doesn't want to talk. He wants to calculate. That sudden silence isn't a panic attack for him. It's a tactical pivot. He's abruptly switching gears to problem-solver mode, using emotional distance as a strategic shortcut to regain a necessary feeling of control. So when he pulls back, it's rarely a rejection of your soul, but rather a desperate attempt to reboot his system so he can strategize his way back to safety. It doesn't mean he doesn't want you. It means he simply doesn't have the cognitive bandwidth to handle the emotional load without stepping away to think. Have you ever felt that sinking sensation in your gut when he pulls back? You clench your phone, your heart races, and suddenly your brain decides a little space equals abandonment. That is the scarcity mindset trap. It's the psychological equivalent of dropping a glass and panicking to catch every single shard before it hits the floor. But when you chase someone who is retreating, you aren't gathering them closer. You're pushing them further away. You start to fumble, finger-typing desperate replies that kill the mystery and dim your own light. Instead, picture his distance not as a door slamming shut, but as a cloud passing over the sun. You have to stop feeding the scarcity. By cultivating an internal sense of abundance and refusing to panic, you transform from a frantic chaser into the confident woman who knows her worth, which is exactly the vibe that pulls him back into orbit. You've felt that sinking stomach when his texts dry up. Is this just a needed recharge, or is he ghosting for good? Think of his distance like a phone battery. A temporary break is a low battery warning where he needs to plug in to power back up, whereas permanent withdrawal is the phone simply turning off. Psychology tells us that a healthy retreat is usually active communication. But the slow fade, that's the dangerous red flag where he excuses himself from plans without offering a verbal explanation, is actually a mechanism of self-preservation to cut you off. He isn't just space out reclining, he's building walls and removing your access. Distinguishing between a pause for equilibrium and a permanent exit is the only way to know if you should chase him down or let go. So pay close attention to whether he leaves the door open or locks it tight. Forget the frantic texts or the heavy sighs. That is a mistake. To turn this around, you have to master the art of the reset by paradoxically giving him even more space. Imagine your connection as a rubber band. If you pull too tight on one end, the tension snaps into anger. But if you let go completely, it snaps back vigorously. You want that irresistible recoil. Psychologically, men crave this safety of autonomy. You need to pivot from clingy pursuer to secure, flourishing individual. Stop treating him with the only oxygen in your lungs. Go out, reconnect with friends, and become obsessed with yourself again. Post those wins publicly to show him there's a vibrant world outside your relationship. This signals deep security. You aren't desperate to hang on. You are content living your own life, which ironically whispers the loudest signal of all, that he is the one who might be missing out. You might feel the desperate urge to close the gap immediately, but treat this like breathing after holding it too long. Rush it, and you'll panic them right back out. Think of that distance not as a cold shoulder, but as a period of necessary hibernation where the emotional roots were growing deeper underground. Now you don't want to just recap the movie. You want to watch the best deleted scenes. Rebuilding intimacy is actually about safety, not speed. You have to invite them back in slowly, touching base with genuine curiosity instead of anxious need. Say something simple like, "I missed your energy at dinner. I'm ready for deep connection now." That vulnerability builds a bridge far stronger than the one that originally broke. You aren't just finding him, you're rebuilding a fortress together.